My beloved child, before you keep scrolling, give yourself these next few moments. The world has taught you to chase noise, to look for instant answers, to believe that one lucky moment will solve every problem. But what if your next breakthrough doesn't begin with luck? What if it begins with one decision, one conversation, or one opportunity you've almost overlooked? Stay with me until the very end, because today's story begins with someone who believed they had reached the end of their financial hope, until one ordinary evening completely changed the way they saw their future. Do not skip ahead. The final moments of this chapter will reveal why the beginning mattered more than you imagined. For months, Matthew carried the same quiet burden. He paid every bill carefully. He worked longer hours. He prayed faithfully. Yet it seemed as though every step forward was followed by 2 steps back. Some nights, he would sit alone at his kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. Not complaining. Not giving up. Simply asking, "Lord, teach me what I need to learn in this season." That prayer slowly became stronger than his frustration. Child, sometimes the greatest breakthrough begins when our prayers change from demanding quick answers to asking for wisdom. Right now, God is examining your heart through the QR code on your screen and the link in the comments. This is your appointed time to act. Just days ago, James from North Carolina sowed a humble seed of $50, asking for a sign. Today, he is rejoicing over an unexpected financial blessing that solved his family's urgent crisis. Turning your back on this divine setup means walking away from your season of favor. Do not let this moment pass. Sow your maximum seed right now and prepare for your own answered prayer. One rainy evening, as Matthew stopped at a neighborhood cafe, he noticed an older gentleman reading a worn notebook. They exchanged a simple greeting. Before leaving, the gentleman smiled and asked, "May I leave you with one thought?" Matthew nodded. Never measure your future only by today's numbers. Measure it by the person you're becoming while working toward tomorrow. Those words stayed with Matthew. Not because they solved his problems overnight, but because they changed the questions he asked himself. Instead of asking, "Why isn't anything changing?" he began asking, "How can I become wiser with what I have today?" Over the following weeks, Matthew started learning new skills during the evenings. He organized his finances more carefully. He reached out to mentors. He repaired relationships he had neglected because of stress. He looked for opportunities to serve others instead of withdrawing into discouragement. Slowly, unexpected doors began opening. A trusted colleague recommended him for a new responsibility. A small side project grew into steady additional income. A conversation led to a partnership he never expected. None of it happened in one dramatic moment. It happened because preparation met opportunity. Child, faith gives us courage to keep walking. Wisdom helps us recognize the doors that open along the way. That night, Matthew opened his journal. Across a fresh page he wrote, "Today's reflection. Real prosperity begins long before it appears in numbers. It begins with integrity, with discipline, with generosity, with patience, with the courage to keep preparing even when progress feels slow. May I become the kind of person who is ready for every opportunity you place before me." He gently closed the journal, looked through the window. The rain had stopped. A new morning was beginning. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled with quiet confidence. Not because every answer had arrived, but because hope had returned. Heaven has guided you to the QR code and the link in the description for a sacred purpose. God is asking you to sow your maximum seed to shield your future and your lineage. Look at Linda from Pennsylvania, who sowed a $300 seed in faith. Today, she is living in her dream home, blessed with absolute peace and divine protection over her children. To ignore this clear instruction is to reject the breakthrough God has designed for you today. Follow the link, plant your seed generously, and let God write your success story next. My beloved child, this journey has only begun. Before you leave this chapter, comment one word: prepared. Let it remind you that today's faithful choices can become tomorrow's unexpected opportunities. If you're ready for part 2, type 2. Because the next chapter reveals the surprising opportunity Matthew almost ignored, and how it became the turning point that reshaped his future. Part 2. My beloved child, stay with me. Do not rush through this chapter. Some people spend years waiting for one extraordinary opportunity, while quietly walking past dozens of ordinary ones. Remain until the final sentence. Because today, Matthew will receive an unexpected invitation. A forgotten lesson from his childhood will return. And one simple decision will begin changing the direction of his future in ways he never imagined. Sometimes, the greatest breakthrough doesn't arrive because life suddenly becomes easier. It arrives because wisdom finally begins guiding our next step. Your breakthrough is just a scan away. Use the QR code or click the link below immediately. Heaven has orchestrated this exact moment for you to sow your seed and secure your destiny. Think of Margaret from Florida, who stepped out in faith with a $500 seed last month. Today, her struggling family business has experienced a supernatural turnaround. Bypassing this heavenly instruction will only delay the blessings reserved for your bloodline. Step forward, sow your maximum seed without fear, and claim your joy today. When we left Matthew, he had stopped asking only for immediate answers. Instead, he began praying for wisdom. Day after day, nothing dramatic appeared to change. He still woke before sunrise, still worked faithfully, still carried responsibilities, still faced uncertainty. But one thing had quietly transformed: his perspective. He no longer measured every day by what he didn't have. He measured it by what he was learning. Child, a grateful heart often recognizes opportunities that a discouraged heart never notices. One Monday morning, as Matthew prepared to leave work, his supervisor stopped him. "Do you have a few minutes?" Matthew wondered if something had gone wrong. Instead, his supervisor smiled. "I've been paying attention. Whenever a difficult project appears, you stay calm. Whenever someone needs help, you volunteer. Whenever a mistake happens, you look for solutions instead of someone to blame." Matthew listened quietly. He had never considered those moments important. To him, they were simply the right thing to do. His supervisor continued, "There's a new opportunity opening soon. No promises yet. But I wanted you to know that your consistency hasn't gone unnoticed." Matthew thanked him sincerely. As he walked home, he realized something. The habits no one applauded yesterday were quietly becoming the reason new doors were beginning to open today. That evening, Matthew visited his parents. His father was repairing an old wooden toolbox that had belonged to Matthew's grandfather. The wood was worn. The hinges had rusted. Yet his father worked patiently. "Why not replace it?" Matthew asked. His father smiled. "Because some things become more valuable after they've been restored." He handed Matthew a small folded note that had been tucked inside the toolbox for years. It was written in his grandfather's handwriting. "Character is built long before opportunity arrives." Matthew read the sentence again. Then again. His grandfather had written it decades earlier. Yet it felt as though it had been written for this exact season of his life. Child. Wisdom passed from one generation often becomes strength for the next. The following weekend, Matthew attended a free community workshop on leadership and personal growth. He expected a few practical lessons. Instead, he met people from every walk of life. A teacher, a mechanic, a nurse, a small business owner, a young college student, an elderly couple celebrating 50 years of marriage. Each person shared one lesson they wished they had learned earlier. The nurse said, "Never let exhaustion convince you that your work has no value." The teacher smiled. "Encourage people before they believe in themselves." The business owner quietly added, "The opportunities that changed my life arrived disguised as responsibility." Matthew filled page after page inside his notebook. He wasn't collecting motivational quotes. He was collecting wisdom earned through experience. After the workshop, an older gentleman named Mr. Collins approached him. "Matthew, may I ask you one question?" "Of course. If someone gave you greater responsibility tomorrow, would your daily habits already be ready for it?" Matthew paused. The question stayed with him. Because he realized, preparation isn't something we begin after opportunity arrives. Preparation is what allows us to recognize opportunity when it appears. Heaven has guided you to the QR code and the link in the description for a sacred purpose. God is asking you to sow your maximum seed to shield your future and your lineage. Look at Linda from Pennsylvania, who sowed a $300 seed in faith. Today, she is living in her dream home, blessed with absolute peace and divine protection over her children. To ignore this clear instruction is to reject the breakthrough God has designed for you today. Follow the link, plant your seed generously, and let God write your success story next. Over the next several weeks, Matthew became even more intentional. He improved his skills. Read books during the evenings instead of endlessly scrolling through his phone. Managed his finances carefully. Made time for family. Reached out to friends he hadn't spoken with in months. He wasn't chasing instant success. He was building a stronger foundation. Little by little, people began trusting him with greater responsibility. His confidence grew. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because faithfulness had quietly become part of his character. Child. Lasting growth is usually too gradual to notice day by day, but unmistakable when you look back. One afternoon, as Matthew prepared to leave the office, his phone rang. It was his supervisor again. "Would you stop by my office before you go?" Matthew smiled. Something felt different. He didn't know what the conversation would bring. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. Because he had learned something important. Peace doesn't come from knowing every answer. It comes from faithfully preparing for whatever tomorrow may hold. That evening, Matthew opened his journal. Across a fresh page he wrote, "Today's reflection. Every faithful decision becomes part of tomorrow's foundation. Every lesson learned with humility prepares me for greater responsibility. Every honest conversation strengthens trust. Every season has something valuable to teach. May I never overlook today's opportunities while waiting for tomorrow's breakthroughs." He gently closed the journal, placed it beside his bed, looked toward the quiet evening sky, and smiled. Not because he knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, but because he had become someone who was ready to meet it with faith, wisdom, and hope. Right now, God is examining your heart through the QR code on your screen and the link in the comments. This is your appointed time to act. Just days ago, James from North Carolina sowed a humble seed of $50, asking for a sign. Today, he is rejoicing over an unexpected financial blessing that solved his family's urgent crisis. Turning your back on this divine setup means walking away from your season of favor. Do not let this moment pass. Sow your maximum seed right now and prepare for your own answered prayer. My beloved child, the journey is becoming even more meaningful. Because in part 3, Matthew receives unexpected news that opens a new chapter in his career, and one surprising conversation reveals how years of quiet faithfulness prepared him for an opportunity he never saw coming. Before you leave this chapter, comment one word. Ready. Because preparation often opens doors before we even realize they are there. And if you're ready for part 3, type 3. Because the next chapter reveals the opportunity Matthew almost missed. Part 3. My beloved child, stay with me. Do not leave this chapter too quickly. Some doors open because we knock. Others open because years of quiet preparation have finally met the right moment. Remain until the final sentence. Because today, Matthew will receive news he never expected. An old mentor will reveal something he has quietly observed for years. And one decision made long ago will suddenly make perfect sense. Sometimes, the breakthrough we have been praying for is not created in a single day. It is uncovered after many faithful days that seemed ordinary at the time. Look at the QR code on your screen or click the link in the pinned comment right now. God directed you here because your name is next on His list for a breakthrough. Just last week, Sarah from Ohio sowed a maximum seed of $100, trusting God with her mounting bills. Today, she is celebrating an unexpected financial open door that cleared her debts. Do not ignore this divine moment. Ignoring it means missing the very blessing meant to rescue your future. Scan the code, sow your maximum seed today, and let your name be the next testimony of God's overflowing favor. The evening after writing in his journal, Matthew could not stop thinking about his supervisor's phone call. He replayed every recent conversation in his mind. Did I make a mistake? Is something changing? Am I prepared for whatever comes next? Instead of letting worry control his thoughts, he did something different. He closed his notebook, folded his hands, and prayed quietly. Lord, if this next season brings greater responsibility, help me carry it with humility. If it brings another season of waiting, help me remain faithful there too. As he finished praying, the uncertainty did not disappear, but the anxiety did. Child, peace does not always come from knowing what will happen next. Sometimes it comes from remembering who walks with us into tomorrow. The next morning, Matthew entered his supervisor's office. The room was quiet. Several folders rested neatly on the desk. His supervisor smiled warmly. "Please have a seat." Matthew sat down. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, his supervisor leaned forward. "I've wanted to have this conversation for several months." Matthew listened carefully. "We've been evaluating several people for a new leadership position. Technical knowledge mattered. Experience mattered. But one quality stood above everything else." Matthew waited. "Trust." The word settled into the room. "We've watched how you respond when no one is paying attention. We've watched how you treat new employees. We've watched how you respond when plans change unexpectedly. We've watched your consistency. Those things cannot easily be taught." Matthew remained silent. He hadn't realized anyone noticed those ordinary moments. His supervisor gently handed him a folder. Inside, there wasn't a dramatic announcement. There wasn't a large celebration. There was simply an invitation. An opportunity to lead a new project that would help shape the future direction of the organization. Matthew looked surprised. "Why me?" His supervisor smiled. "Because leadership begins long before someone receives the title. You've already been leading through your character." Those words stayed with Matthew. Not because they praised him. Because they reminded him that every unnoticed act of integrity had quietly mattered. A divine opportunity is waiting for you behind that QR code and the link in the description. Heaven is testing your faith today. Look at Robert from Texas, who sowed a faithful seed of $250 during his darkest hour. God honored his obedience, resolved a bitter legal dispute, and blessed him with a beautiful new home for his family. Walking away from this prompt means closing the door on your own miracle. God wants to reshape your future today. Act now, sow your highest seed, and watch Him turn your life around. After work, Matthew walked to the small neighborhood cafe where he had once met the elderly gentleman months earlier. To his surprise, the gentleman was sitting at the same corner table, almost as though he had been expecting him. Matthew smiled. "It's good to see you again." The older man returned the smile. "And how was your journey?" Matthew laughed softly. "Different than I expected." They spoke for nearly an hour. Matthew shared the news about the new opportunity. The older gentleman listened carefully. Then asked, "Tell me, which part of today's news surprised you the most?" Matthew thought carefully. "That people were paying attention to things I assumed no one noticed." The gentleman nodded. "That's often how character works. It grows quietly. Then one day, people begin trusting its fruit." Child, integrity is rarely built in public. It is built through private decisions repeated consistently. Before leaving, the gentleman reached into his coat pocket. He removed an old fountain pen. Its surface showed years of careful use. "This pen belonged to my father," he explained. "He used it every evening to write one lesson he learned that day." He gently placed it into Matthew's hand. "I think it's your turn to continue that tradition." Matthew looked at the pen with gratitude. It wasn't valuable because of its appearance. It was valuable because of the life that had quietly shaped it. That evening, Matthew sat beside the window as rain gently tapped against the glass. He opened a brand new notebook. The fountain pen rested in his hand. Across the first page he wrote, "Lessons worth carrying forward." People notice consistency even when they never mention it. Preparation begins long before opportunity appears. Character quietly opens doors that talent alone cannot. Faithfulness during ordinary seasons prepares us for extraordinary responsibilities. The greatest promotions often begin with the smallest daily choices. He paused, then added one final sentence. "May success never become more important to me than serving others well." He gently closed the notebook, placed the pen beside it, and looked through the window. The rain had stopped. Moonlight reflected across the quiet streets. For the first time in many years, Matthew wasn't asking when his life would change. He realized it already had. Not because everything around him was different, but because everything inside him had grown stronger. Several weeks later, the new project officially began. The first meeting included people from many different departments. Some were confident. Some were uncertain. Some had never worked together before. Matthew stood before them. He remembered every lesson he had written. Instead of beginning with numbers, he began with gratitude. Instead of speaking about pressure, he spoke about purpose. Instead of asking people to impress one another, he invited them to support one another. As the meeting ended, one colleague quietly said, "I've never left a planning meeting feeling this hopeful." Matthew smiled. He understood. Real leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about helping people believe they could move forward together. Your divine breakthrough is just a scan away. Use the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description and pinned comment. God has orchestrated this meeting because He wants to reshape your future. He is calling on you to plant your highest seed of faith today. Turning your back on this moment means walking away from the divine protection and favor God wants to establish for your life. Listen to His voice, visit the link, and sow your seed to the maximum right now. My beloved child, the journey is becoming even more meaningful. Because in part 4, Matthew discovers how one act of encouragement from years ago has quietly transformed another family's future, revealing that the greatest breakthroughs are often measured not only by what changes in our own lives, but by the hope we inspire in others. Before you leave this chapter, comment one word: courage. Because courage grows stronger every time faithfulness chooses the next right step. And if you're ready for part 4, type 4. Because the next chapter reveals a legacy Matthew never realized he was building. Part 4. My beloved child, stay with me. Do not rush through this chapter. Some people spend years looking for the moment that changes everything. Yet when they finally look back, they discover that life was changing little by little all along. One faithful decision, one honest conversation, one difficult season, one quiet prayer, one opportunity they almost ignored. Remain until the final sentence. Because today, Matthew will uncover the unexpected impact of a decision he made years ago. A family he never realized he encouraged will walk back into his life. And one remarkable story will remind him that genuine blessings often travel farther than we can ever see. Sometimes, the greatest breakthrough is not measured by what arrives in our hands. It is measured by what begins growing through our lives. Right now, God is examining your heart through the QR code on your screen and the link in the comments. This is your appointed time to act. Just days ago, James from North Carolina sowed a humble seed of $50, asking for a sign. Today, he is rejoicing over an unexpected financial blessing that solved his family's urgent crisis. Turning your back on this divine setup means walking away from your season of favor. Do not let this moment pass. Sow your maximum seed right now and prepare for your own answered prayer. Several months passed. The new leadership role brought fresh responsibilities. Longer meetings. More decisions. Greater accountability. Some days ended with success. Other days ended with questions. Yet every evening, Matthew continued the habit he had promised himself he would never abandon. Before sleeping, he opened his journal. He wrote one lesson, one reason for gratitude, and one way he had witnessed hope during the day. That simple routine became an anchor. Whenever pressure increased, it reminded him who he wanted to become. Child. Success becomes much easier to carry when gratitude remains at its center. One Friday afternoon, Matthew received an invitation from Mrs. Harper. "Would you speak at our annual community gathering?" He smiled. "I'd be honored." The following weekend, the community center was filled with people. Young families, students, business owners, teachers, retirees, people from every season of life. Matthew stood quietly behind the stage curtain. He wasn't nervous about speaking. He was wondering whether anything he shared would truly matter. Then he remembered the elderly gentleman's words from the cafe. Never underestimate the influence of one sincere conversation. He smiled, took a deep breath, and walked onto the stage. Instead of beginning with achievements, he began with honesty. "Several years ago, I believed progress always looked dramatic. Now I've learned. Most lasting change begins quietly. It begins when we choose integrity even when no one notices. When we remain faithful during ordinary days. When we encourage someone who feels forgotten. When we continue learning instead of becoming discouraged." The room became completely still. No one interrupted. No one looked distracted. People simply listened. Not because Matthew sounded extraordinary. Because his words reflected experiences many people quietly understood. Child. Truth spoken with humility often reaches hearts more deeply than impressive speeches. After the gathering ended, a young couple waited patiently near the entrance. With them stood a little girl holding a drawing. The husband smiled. "Mr. Matthew, you probably don't remember us." Matthew searched his memory. The faces felt familiar, but he couldn't place them. The young man laughed softly. "5 years ago, my wife and I attended one of your first workshops. We almost left after 10 minutes. We believed nothing could change." Matthew slowly remembered. They had sat near the back, spoken very little, listened carefully, then quietly disappeared after the meeting. "We wanted you to know something," the young woman said. "That evening changed how we saw our future. We began working together instead of blaming one another. We created a plan. We learned new skills. We became patient with one another again. And today," she smiled toward the little girl, "our home feels completely different." Matthew looked at the child. She stepped forward, handed him the drawing. It showed several people standing beneath a large tree. Across the top, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping my family smile again." Matthew gently held the picture. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Look at the QR code on your screen or click the link in the pinned comment right now. God directed you here because your name is next on His list for a breakthrough. Just last week, Sarah from Ohio sowed a maximum seed of $100, trusting God with her mounting bills. Today, she is celebrating an unexpected financial open door that cleared her debts. Do not ignore this divine moment. Ignoring it means missing the very blessing meant to rescue your future. Scan the code, sow your maximum seed today, and let your name be the next testimony of God's overflowing favor. As the family prepared to leave, the husband quietly added, "You once said something I'll never forget." Matthew smiled. "What was it?" The man answered without hesitation, "Don't let today's disappointment become tomorrow's identity." We wrote those words on our refrigerator. They've stayed there ever since. Matthew quietly laughed. He barely remembered saying them. Yet another family had built part of their journey around that encouragement. Child, you may never fully know how far one hopeful conversation travels. That evening, Matthew walked through the community garden behind the center. The flowers were in full bloom. Children laughed nearby. Neighbors greeted one another warmly. Mrs. Harper joined him. "You seem thoughtful." Matthew smiled. "I'm realizing something." "What's that?" "For years, I prayed for my life to make a difference. I expected that to happen through one extraordinary event. Instead, it happened through ordinary moments I almost forgot." Mrs. Harper nodded. "That's how most meaningful lives are built. One faithful day at a time." When Matthew returned home, he opened the notebook that now held years of reflections. The fountain pen rested beside it. He slowly turned to a fresh page. Across the top he wrote, "Today's reflection. A meaningful life is rarely built by dramatic moments alone. It is built by ordinary choices repeated with faithfulness. One promise kept. One person encouraged. One lesson learned. One act of kindness. One opportunity embraced with humility. Every faithful day becomes another stone in the foundation of tomorrow. May I never overlook the quiet opportunities that allow hope to grow." He gently closed the notebook. Looked toward the window. The evening sky glowed with soft colors as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. He smiled. Not because every dream had already come true, but because he finally understood. The greatest breakthrough had never been about changing only his circumstances. It had been about becoming the kind of person who could bring hope wherever he went. Look at the QR code on your screen or click the link in the pinned comment right now. God directed you here because your name is next on His list for a breakthrough. Just last week, Sarah from Ohio sowed a maximum seed of $100, trusting God with her mounting bills. Today, she is celebrating an unexpected financial open door that cleared her debts. Do not ignore this divine moment. Ignoring it means missing the very blessing meant to rescue your future. Scan the code, sow your maximum seed today, and let your name be the next testimony of God's overflowing favor. My beloved child, only one chapter remains. Because in the last chapter, Matthew discovers the full legacy of his journey. and one final gathering reveals how years of quiet faithfulness inspired countless ordinary people to continue passing hope, wisdom, and compassion from one generation to the next. Before you leave this chapter, comment one word: gratitude. Because gratitude helps us recognize blessings that were quietly growing all along. And if you're ready for the last chapter, type last. Because the final chapter brings every lesson of this journey together in a deeply meaningful conclusion. Last. My beloved child, stay with me until the very last sentence. Do not leave too quickly. Because this is the moment every chapter has been quietly leading toward. The difficult mornings, the silent prayers, the long seasons of waiting, the unexpected conversations, the lessons written inside Matthew's journal, the people who crossed his path. None of it happened without purpose. You may have thought this story was about finding a financial breakthrough. But now, you are about to discover something much deeper. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough is not the first opportunity that appears. It is the person we become while preparing for it. Remain until the end. Because before this story closes, Matthew will receive one final surprise, one final conversation, and one final lesson that will stay with him for the rest of his life. Right now, God is examining your heart through the QR code on your screen and the link in the comments. This is your appointed time to act. Just days ago, James from North Carolina sowed a humble seed of $500, asking for a sign. Today, he is rejoicing over an unexpected financial blessing that solved his family's urgent crisis. Turning your back on this divine setup means walking away from your season of favor. Do not let this moment pass. Sow your maximum seed right now and prepare for your own answered prayer. Another year quietly passed. The seasons changed. Spring became summer. Summer became autumn. Autumn became winter. Life continued moving forward. Matthew's journal had grown thick with reflections. Its pages were no longer filled with questions alone. Now they held gratitude, wisdom, lessons learned through ordinary days. Every evening, he continued writing. Not because he wanted to remember everything, but because he never wanted to forget how faithfully God had guided him through seasons that once seemed impossible. Looking back, he smiled. Many of the prayers he thought had gone unanswered had actually been answered in ways he never expected. Not instantly, but perfectly in their own time. Child, sometimes we understand yesterday's delays only after tomorrow arrives. One Saturday morning, Mrs. Harper invited Matthew back to the community center. "There's someone asking for you," she said with a smile. As Matthew entered the main hall, he noticed dozens of familiar faces. People from different seasons of his journey. Mr. Collins, the elderly gentleman from the cafe. Former co-workers. Young students. Families. Volunteers. People he had encouraged over the years. He looked around in surprise. "What's happening?" Mrs. Harper quietly replied. "Today isn't about speeches. Today is about stories." One by one, people stood, not to praise Matthew, but to share moments that had quietly changed their lives. A young teacher smiled. "Years ago you reminded me that patience matters more than perfection. I've shared that lesson with hundreds of students since then." A father stood next. "When I lost confidence, One conversation helped me believe I could begin again. An elderly widow softly said, "You visited when I felt forgotten. You didn't solve every problem, but you reminded me I wasn't alone." Matthew listened in silence. He remembered some of those moments. Others he had completely forgotten. Yet every story carried the same message. Hope had continued traveling. Toward the end of the gathering, Mrs. Harper placed a beautifully bound journal into Matthew's hands. Its cover was simple. Dark blue leather. Across the front, only 4 words had been embossed. Lives touched with hope. Matthew slowly opened it. Inside, there were hundreds of handwritten messages. Different handwriting. Different ages. Different stories. Your encouragement helped me finish school. Your honesty inspired me to rebuild trust. Your kindness reminded me that difficult seasons don't last forever. Your example encouraged our family to begin serving others together. Page after page. Hope. Gratitude. Faithfulness. Matthew quietly closed the journal. His eyes filled with tears. Not because people remembered him, but because he realized something extraordinary. No act of compassion had been wasted. Not one. Child. The smallest act of kindness often begins a story whose ending we may never fully see. A divine opportunity is waiting for you behind that QR code and the link in the description. Heaven is testing your faith today. Look at Robert from Texas, who sowed a faithful seed of $250 during his darkest hour. God honored his obedience, resolved a bitter legal dispute, and blessed him with a beautiful new home for his family. Walking away from this prompt means closing the door on your own miracle. God wants to reshape your future today. Act now, sow your highest seed, and watch him turn your life around. After everyone had gone home, Matthew walked alone through the community garden. The flowers gently moved in the evening breeze. The benches were empty. The sky glowed with the final colors of sunset. The elderly gentleman from the cafe quietly joined him. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, the gentleman smiled. "Do you remember our first conversation?" Matthew laughed softly. "I'll never forget it. You told me not to measure my future only by today's numbers." The older man nodded. "And what do you believe now?" Matthew looked across the peaceful garden, then answered slowly, "I believe the richest people are not always those who possess the most. They're often the ones who leave the most hope behind." The gentleman smiled. "Now you've learned the lesson I hoped you would discover." That evening, Matthew returned home. He sat beside the same window where this journey had begun. The same notebook rested beside him. The same fountain pen. The same quiet room. Yet everything felt different. He opened to the final blank page. Then slowly wrote, "Final reflection. There was a time when I believed breakthroughs arrived all at once. Now I understand. Breakthroughs are often built one faithful day at a time. Every promise kept. Every lesson learned. Every prayer offered with sincerity. Every difficult season endured with courage. Every opportunity embraced with humility. Every person encouraged along the way. Together they shape a life that becomes stronger, wiser, and more compassionate." True abundance is not measured only by what comes into our hands. It is also measured by the hope we place into the hearts of others. If my life helps even one person continue walking with courage, then every season has been worthwhile. He gently closed the journal, placed it beside the others, turned off the lamp, stepped outside beneath the stars. The night was wonderfully quiet. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Neighbors greeted one another as they walked home. The breeze moved gently through the trees. Matthew smiled. Not because life had become perfect, but because he had discovered something greater than he had been searching for at the beginning. Purpose, peace, faithfulness, hope, and the joy of becoming someone who encouraged others to keep moving forward. Heaven has guided you to the QR code and the link in the description for a sacred purpose. God is asking you to sow your maximum seed to shield your future and your lineage. Look at Linda from Pennsylvania, who sowed a $300 seed in faith. Today, she is living in her dream home, blessed with absolute peace and divine protection over her children. To ignore this clear instruction is to reject the breakthrough God has designed for you today. Follow the link, plant your seed generously, and let God write your success story next. My beloved child, as this story comes to its final page, remember this. Do not underestimate today's faithful choices. A kind word, an honest decision, a patient response, a grateful heart, a willingness to keep learning. These quiet moments often become the foundation of tomorrow's greatest opportunities. Walk forward with courage. Live with integrity. Encourage generously. And trust that even when progress feels slow, your life can still be growing in meaningful ways. Before you leave this story, comment one word: abundance. Let it remind you that true abundance begins in the heart, and over time, it can overflow into every area of a life lived with wisdom, faith, and compassion.